From coast to coast and around the world, this is Kaleidoscope, America's most exciting radio magazine. Stay tuned for more.
I'm singing in the rain. Yes, I'm singing in the rain. Oh, what a glorious feeling. I'm happy again. Hello, you are listening to Singing in the Rain with your host, Sunny Chayes, and I'm just getting right to it today because I am doing a roundup for Marianne Williamson and her amazing event she had called SisterGiant. We had a great conversation a couple weeks ago. I played last week one bit of it, and then we are just going to go right into the second bit. So for all of you who do not know Marianne, who may be 5 or 10 people, she is a mega author, and she is a phenomenal speaker, and really she is an inspirer of people for many, many years, and a very humble person. As she gets more accomplished, she seems to get more humble. It's really cool. So that is about Marianne, and she will be coming right on the show here. We're just going to bring her right on. It was quite beautiful, by the way, that most people came back on Sunday. I don't know if you noticed that, but that was pretty cool.
It made me extremely happy. One of the things that was the most gratifying to me was how most people not only came back on Sunday, most people stayed till the end.
Yes.
And that, I can't even tell you what,
Yes.
You know, you do something like this, and what's your payoff? Satisfaction.
That's it. That's right.
You know, feeling good inside.
That's
and I felt
right.
real good inside.
Well, I'm so glad, and you certainly deserve to. And again, this so many different topics were discussed for, as I say, 19 and a half hours. And I mean, I so appreciated that it was just a lot about a lot of honesty. You laid it out, and your guests laid it out. And again, you were such a gorgeous host to the people, like you're saying, they felt, I think, trusted and able to just go for it, whatever they were up to.
Very interestingly, if you remember Saturday night, the political party panel, it was very obvious that audience was further ahead than the panel.
Yeah.
That audience, it was very clear from the audience reactions, that was an audience that was with it.
Quite true.
I was really excited sometimes when certain reactions that I wouldn't have, because I didn't want to appear rude to my guest, the audience had. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it was definitely a great, kind of monitoring of behavior. Really, people were very, very respectful of everyone's opinions and feelings. And again, you laid out what was wrong with the United States. You just boom, boom, boom. It's like, okay, if we don't talk about this stuff and heal this stuff and get it on the table, yeah, it all happened. Let's tell the truth about that, and then let's go from here. It's like you were saying with Germany. It's like they have really progressed in how they hold themselves in the world because of having that breakthrough.
Whether it's a nation or an individual, you have to take full ownership of your mistakes.
That's it.
And do what you can to make right.
That's right.
And I used Germany as an example. What I think I said then, I've certainly said it publicly, whether I said it last weekend or not. I think certainly, look, we're living at a time of some economic crisis and upheaval everywhere. But for the most part, Germany is doing very, very well comparatively. And I think that the vitality, not only culturally but particularly economically in Germany, I don't think it would have been supported by universal forces had Germany not done the work that it's done to atone and to repair and to make amends. And now there are at last younger generations of Germans. It's quite a beautiful thing to see, who in ways that others who are German would know better than I, but that is obvious to see even from outside the system, are not carrying the weight that generations before them, between the war, the generations right after the war, generations that grew up as adolescents it sort of occurring to them, well, that would have been mommy and daddy. Daddy, what did you do? And I mean, there were generations who were so scarred. Mm-hmm. And you can just see how the cleanup work in an individual's life and in a nation's life affects the generations that come after.
And I'm so glad
profound,
that it is profound, and it is a great example of having something that's a huge element of negativity, to then the anger to come up, to fight it out, to clean it up, and then to have this solid, like you say, the universal support now is there.
The reason this is so germane to the United States is because we haven't done ours.
That's the point.
And we, Americans are decent people. Look, people are decent. People are good. The idea that, you're going to have to apologize for your mistake, you're going to have to own it, and you're going to have to atone and make amends. An individual says, right, get that, I got it. But some nations have seemed to get it, whether it's slavery or the genocide of Native Americans or the militaristic misadventures in places like Vietnam and Iraq, and some of the economic policies that are holdovers from slavery, for instance, in the United States today. So, it is a strong, not a weak person who admits their mistakes. And it's a strong, not a weak nation that admits its mistakes. We tend to be divided into two categories. This is a very broad generalization, but unfortunately, I think it's legitimate. There are Americans who all they look at is what we've done wrong. They won't give us any credit for what we've done right. And there are other Americans who only will talk about what we've done right and consider you un-American or unpatriotic if you point out the things we've done wrong. And that's just not how life is. Mm-hmm. And in an individual's life, you need people. That's what friends are. That's what therapists are. That's what clergy is at its best. Who, when you're going on and on about how great you are, someone who really loves you will remind you gently you didn't do everything right. And the same is true, the people who really love you and care for you, who when you go on and on about, oh my God, I did this and I did this wrong and I did that wrong, will remind you, you didn't do everything wrong. Mm-hmm. That's called maturity. That's called development. That's called growing up. And balance. Well, yeah, the balance that you seek to creatively pursue, not as in just holding both, but dealing with both. Mm-hmm. Every generation, not only every generation in terms of its parents, but every generation in terms of this chapter of my life versus the last chapter of my life. Where did we get it right? Because where we got it right, we want to build on that. Mm-hmm. Where do we get it wrong? Because in that area, we want to interrupt the pattern. Mm-hmm. And you only interrupt the pattern if you look honestly at your mistakes, what you've done, what you're doing, and commit to doing things better.
That's right. And so one of the aspects of SisterGiant that I will take with me forever, and thank you so much for this, is taking, as I say, that sort of the 2 days, 19 and a half hours, and talking about all of the things, the good, the bad, and the ugly, having the conversation with many different people with different backgrounds and different opinions and different political passions and environmental passions, and just all of these different people coming together and having all this energy and working through it and being together and taking this whole journey together and eating together and being together. And then at the very end, you taking us on an hour journey, which was personal to you too, in that you have seen ups and downs in your own career, mainly ups. And where you have gone, and also to remind us, please, people, there will be times when you go into the political arena, remember this moment, remember your heart, remember your message, remember why you're doing this, and you will have tomatoes thrown at you, you will have people digging you, and money thrown at you, and opportunities, and lots of different ways of being seduced off your path, and as life can be. But please, people, stay with your message. And that to me was one of the most important messages I've ever heard, and I would like everyone to take that hour and hear it. I hope you can record it.
Well, thank you. I think we should take that excerpt and use whatever of it that you'd like.
Absolutely, because I think that, and again, as I said to you before, that would not have meant anything without that 19 and a half hours. And if we had all left an hour earlier, what we went through together, I don't think would have been anywhere as powerful. And I mean, I know there were many tears, and I certainly had my own, but I know I will remember that. I mean, no matter what, and to hear it from you, I mean, you have gone a long way in your life. You know, you started out being someone who no one knew, and now you're someone who many, many people know, and people will get on a plane from wherever to just come because you're setting the table. And with that, knowing that if that happens to me, if that happens, you know, to anyone in that room where success comes, hey, in anything, if they're dancers or singers, lots of, I'm sure, entertainers in the room, to always remember that that is really what we're here for, is our true message, and to allow that to always be what drives us and not be seduced by the outer trappings. And it happens all the time, but that's an old paradigm. We don't have to play like that anymore.
Well, from your mouth to God's ears, as my mother would say.
Let's have it happen. So I want to talk briefly about Gene Houston.
Well, as I said on the weekend, people ask me who are your idols and heroes and the people that you read and listen to. And of course, Gene Houston is one of mine. And I think she's a national treasure. Mm-hmm. She has greatly affected my life, and I think she's affected the life of more than one generation. And hers is a voice that only becomes more and more profound and magnificent.
She just seems to have the finger on the pulse, and I like riding along with her.
I feel the same way. I like riding along with her. It's a good way to put it.
And so is there anyone else you want to talk about who was there that really...
Shannon Daly Harris works for the Children's Defense Fund. She was marvelous on child poverty in the United States. Adam Winkler, UCLA law professor, who is an expert on the subject of Citizens United and a constitutional amendment to override the undue influence of money on our political processes. He's also an expert on gun issues, so we will have him on one of our first Wednesday phone calls.
So I'm going to stop us there because I am now going to bring a bit of Adam Winkler to us. So we had an opportunity to chat while I was at SisterGiant, and let's just bring him on.
Adam, thanks for being with us, and thanks for such an awesome talk that you gave just now.
You're very kind. Thank you so much.
It was beautiful. So informative. So, yeah, this Citizens United thing is just kind of come upon us, and I think a lot of us don't even know that it happened.
Right, in 2010, the Supreme Court ruled in a case called Citizens United that corporations have the same free speech rights as ordinary individuals and can spend unlimited amounts of money to influence our elections. It was really a radical opinion that went against decades of precedent and 100 years of campaign finance law that always imposed special restrictions on corporations.
So what you're saying is the idea that Obama was elected in 2008 by so many $5 contributions, and then now this past election we had record-breaking amount of money ever by a huge margin. This is a problem.
It really is a problem, and what we're seeing in this past election, the 2012 election, is an unprecedented flood of money going into the elections. So it was approximately $1 billion in outside spending, super PACs and other groups like the Chamber of Commerce spending money to influence this election. It was, it's undisclosed. We don't even know the exact amount. We can only estimate by the number of ads that are run on television. An interesting statistic that I saw recently was that in 2008, Virginia voters, a swing state at the time, were inundated with 7,000 campaign ads. In this past election season, 90,000 election ads in Virginia. So we're seeing this money is just flooding into the airwaves. Candidates can't even buy space if they buy it at the last minute because it's all taken up by super PACs that have spent a fortune to sort of drown out other voices.
Well, the other problem with all of that, I feel also, is that I'm noticing that it's becoming so much more sort of dumbed down. I'm just going to say that. I mean, when I listen to the people, I mean, even Obama, I mean, he did say that he was really upset about the fact that there was so much money being spent. And it's like, okay, well, you spend $5, well, I have to. Well, you spend 500, million, well, I have to now. And, I mean, in the ads have also gotten, I feel, so repetitious, and it's like they're just so dumbed down. So the information is even sort of insulting, in my opinion. What do you think about that?
You're absolutely right. We are dumbing down. These commercials are not the best way to get voters information. You know, voters learn a lot more when you have a debate and people can actually talk and see someone explain something at length. I think, you know, part of the reason why Mitt Romney did well in the first debate is because people finally got to see him talk outside of the election ads. And I think that's a good sign. We want to have candidates be able to communicate directly with we the people. You don't do that with 15 or 30-second campaign ads that spend most of their time just demonizing the other person.
And also taking points that where you're sort of these like little sound bites where it's just drummed over and over and over again. I mean, if I hear one more time someone say, who hasn't done the reading, has not really dug deeper, Obama did nothing in 4 years, and Mitt Romney is going to come in and, you know, save us all. It's like, okay, come on.
We are listening to the great and fun Adam Winkler, who was at SisterGiant, and you might hear some noise in the background because
I would love it to get back to the days where it really
having
was
lunch.
more about what am I going to do? When am I going to do it? How am I going to do it?
It's so true, and that's what we really need from our elected officials. And I think Citizens United really makes that much more difficult because it is an arms race in some ways. The other guy's spending so much money. If you don't raise a lot of money and combat what he's spending, you're going to lose. And it's not necessarily although studies consistently show that the candidate that spends the most money is far more likely to win than the candidate who spends less money. It's not a perfect predictor, but nonetheless, if you're a candidate like Obama, you need to go out and raise all this money, and you need to go create super PACs and have someone create other outside groups to support your candidacy. Otherwise, you can't be competitive. So that's what Citizens United has really done to American politics.
So there is a way to turn this around. Help us know how that would be.
Well, there's a couple ways to turn this around. Some people think that the Supreme Court's just going to reverse its decision, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. The 5 justices in the majority in that case, led by Antonin Scalia and John Roberts, they don't second-guess themselves very often. So I don't think it's going to be overturned very quickly. But what we can do, I think, is 2 things. I think we can push and vote for elected officials who will nominate and confirm Supreme Court justices who will respect the long tradition of special restrictions on corporations when it comes to campaign finance law and our political system. And the other thing we could do is organize to amend the Constitution. As long as the Supreme Court has its current majority, they're going to hold to Citizens United. The only way to change that is by amending the Constitution. There are federal statutes, proposed statutes that have been bandied about a little bit, like the Disclose Act, that will require corporations to reveal where they're giving their money to political candidates. But, you know, and that's a step in the right direction, but it's a small step. We don't need to know just which corporations are taking over our democracy. We need to do more to stop the corporations from taking over our democracy.
I mean, and I think that we've had a problem with that because, I mean, I think that through different situations with hanging chads or with just having more and more people and feeling that, you know, it's the lesser of 2 evils when we're voting or not really thinking that our vote counts. I was glad to see that this election, I mean, even though, again, it is not the number of votes that should be. I mean, we have done so much to get the vote, and I think of Europe where people vote so much more, and, you know, many places in the world, we're still a little taking that great privilege and luxury for granted, which I think is very sad. But I think there was some action, you know, this time. I think people were feeling that they needed to get to the polls and have our voices heard. And so hopefully that can make a difference with Citizens United in having us stand up and get our country back.
If there's a silver lining of the Citizens United decision, it's that the Supreme Court case that empowers corporations and disempowers we the people has really led to we the people becoming empowered in the same strange, ironic way.
Amen.
It's caused people to organize. It's caused people to think about, hey, we need to take back our politics. And if Citizens United ends up having the effect of getting people back into politics because they realize only by fighting hard will they be able to reverse this decision and what it's unleashed into our politics, then overall maybe it'll be a good thing in the long run for American history. But it's really incumbent upon us now to organize, to fight, to get together, to think of ways that we can respond, to run candidates for office. We saw it was a great year for women at the polls. Not only did their votes matter more than anyone else's because they were the majority of voters, but not only that, but we also saw a huge number of women elected to office, a huge increase from what we've seen. Still not enough, though. We need to get women elected at every level of government, from your school board to your city council to your county commissioners to your state legislature to your state Supreme Court to your congressman and your senator and everywhere you can go. And all the way right up to the presidency of the United States. And I think that Citizens United may push more and more ordinary people who see what's happening with their democracy to get involved in politics and to respond.
And sometimes that's what it takes. It's like when things are just kind of going along and people are comfortable, that's not when people tend to get into action. It's when something is, there's a tremor in the force, and we got to come to the party and literally and make something happen. Mm-hmm. So you were giving some websites out, I think, or you were giving out some organizations that people can actually, Google and maybe find out how they can get involved. So what are those?
There's so many different groups. First of all, I think SisterGiant is the first place to start, because SisterGiant's agenda is much broader than some of just these constitutional amendment organizations. But there are important groups like Move to Amend, Common Cause, Fix Our America. There's a bunch of groups that are fighting hard for a constitutional amendment, that are getting together, trying to figure out what the best way to frame this amendment is, how do we get it passed. It's not a short-term fix. It's not going to happen next year. It's not going to happen necessarily in the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. But that's okay. As I talked about today at the SisterGiant event, this wonderful event filled with so many terrific people, was that, if you think about the women suffragists, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, they started their fight in the 1840s and 1850s, and they didn't get their amendment giving women the right to vote until 1920. And sometimes it takes that long to change the Constitution. I'm hopeful that Citizens United won't take that long, but it's a long-term game. And as those women suffragists never gave up hope, and kept fighting and accomplished their goal, that's what we need to do now, and bring those organizations together and make this one fight for we the people.
And again, with did I say perseverance? Staying with it, and the determination and the heart to really make a difference.
I think that's absolutely right. Very inspirational, and that's the way we have to think about it. I mean, these are big changes we want to make in our society, and they're not going to be easy to make, and there's going to be a whole bunch of forces arrayed to stop us from doing it. But that just makes it more important that we get together and we fight, and we take it step by step. You don't run a marathon with one step.
That's right. Or again, as the Archbishop Desmond Tutu says, you can't eat an elephant only but one bite at a time.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Adam. I so enjoyed talking with you, and I would love to invite you back on my show, and we can have a much longer conversation.
Love to do it anytime. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Bye for now. So that is Adam Winkler, who is teaching at UCLA, and you can definitely find out more information about him at SisterGiant. And I want to remind people to go to SisterGiant, as Adam was saying. And let's now bring Marianne back.
Will be bubbling up in the next few months and years in a very big way. There is a documentary by Eugene Jarecki called The House I Live In that I highly recommend. We incarcerate about 2.4 million people in the United States. We're a fifth of the world's population, but we incarcerate 25% of its prisoners. During the 1970s, we had 300,000 people in prison in the United States. Today, it's almost 2.5 million. And 500,000 of those are nonviolent drug offenders. In this movie, this documentary makes it clear the devastating effect of the drug war, which was initiated. Drugs weren't even that big a problem at the time. I mean, they've actually made drugs a bigger issue, and it really does follow, starting with Richard Nixon, how the whole thing developed and for what political reasons it developed. Interesting things the movie had to say about Nixon, because and I think that this was true about Nixon in many ways. He was a conflicted man. In private, he knew that the way to treat the drug issue was through prevention and rehabilitation. But it was a political strategy to start this tough law and order drug war thing, which of course then Ronald Reagan totally magnified. And, you know, it's not like the Democratic presidents all come across looking that much better, so it wasn't partisan in that sense. I think the main point is that it is a prohibition that has not worked. Prohibitions rarely do. Even Pat Robertson, you can't be more conservative in your politics and your religious dogma than Pat Robertson says it's time to end the drug war. So I think that this is an issue that will not be coming from the top, it will be coming from the bottom. And I believe that unbelievable, immense amounts of unnecessary human suffering have resulted from the drug war, including a devastating effect on the relationship of people, particularly in disadvantaged communities, to the police, to law enforcement. One of the things, once again, very touching in this movie is how the police recognize it as how is this? It's just tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, and it's getting us nowhere, and it's costing us tremendously. Meanwhile, in even more nefarious ways, it is making a fortune for what is now called the prison industrial complex. So these are examples of those shadows that it's not fun to look at, but that we need to look at in order to be responsible stewards of American democracy. And that's what every generation of adults is. We are stewards of the history of our nation.
It's so true. And I really was amazed, this political campaign that we just had, that there really was not much about the environment.
Much? Excuse me, sir. We're way beyond not much. Yeah. There was zero discussion of the environment. There was, except one time when you know, I mean, maybe 2 or 3 sentences. Zero discussion of poverty, zero discussion of child poverty, zero discussion of mass incarceration. And that's part of what this whole conversation is about. You know, the Democrats and the Republicans have a stranglehold on the conversation. In order to get elected and to stay elected, you are beholden to corporate interests because the money is so necessary, and that will be true until we have public funding of political campaigns and until we have a constitutional amendment to override Citizens United, or maybe a repeal of Citizens United. In the meantime, any conversation that does not make money for somebody is almost off the table. And this is not only dangerous, but it is an aberration in terms of American political history. Third-party voices have been extremely important. Abolition came from the Abolitionist Party. Women's suffrage came from the Suffragette Party. Social Security, interestingly enough, came from the Socialist Party. So this idea of the way the Democrats and Republicans, in a kind of unholy alliance, have squeezed out third-party voices is very, very unhealthy. And it keeps us from talking about the things that matter most. Interestingly enough, if you look at the farewell address of George Washington, he warned us against political parties, period. Just as Eisenhower warned us against the military-industrial complex, which was a phrase that he coined.
And that's right. I mean, when you have 2 people chatting, it's like you need that third. You need that third energy.
Absolutely, because it's as you said, we just had a presidential election. I'm reminded of Martin Luther King's comment, your life begins to end on the day you stop talking about things that matter most. That was, once again, the emphasis of SisterGiant. We will refuse to not talk about things that matter most. We will refuse to be co-opted by an increasingly meaningless and superficial popular culture where we give more time to ultimately silly issues, which are fun for all of us. I mean, I'm a girl, you know. It's not like I don't have fun as much as the next person with, you know, time spent and conversation or activity that is ultimately meaningless and frivolous. It has a place in life,
right?
But it should be on the periphery. It should not be the mainstay of our participation in life and community.
Exactly. And I think, again, with the idea that people feel empowered, I love how you put that women do feel more empowered with knowledge. I think all people do. I'm one of those people who don't feel that I can put my 2 cents in unless I know at least 80% of what I'm talking about. Because I don't want to be shot down. I don't want to be made to look like an idiot.
Exactly.
I don't want to have someone make me wrong.
Right.
And so I'll shut up until I know what I'm up to.
Well, Ann Richards said that Ginger Rogers did everything that Fred Astaire did except backwards and in high heels. And that's extremely important because on one hand, we shouldn't be so reticent to speak our minds. However, Just like men are reticent to ask for directions, we're reticent to ask for the facts because we're embarrassed that we don't know. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we have to have more facts than men do because it's almost understood that we will be shot down, we will be invalidated and embarrassed by someone. And so we got to have a lot of facts in our pocket. Mm-hmm. And that's hopefully something that SisterGiant will help people with those conference calls and all the work that we do continuing.
And listening to NPR and BBC.
That's right. You go, girl.
And reading your articles in the
Thank you.
Huffington Post.
Thank you.
I love how you write them too because it's just kind of just the facts, Jack. You know, it's like just get to it and do it and read it and know what's happening. And I think that it can. I do feel that SisterGiant very possibly could have been a tipping point in some way. If nothing else, it was definitely a flag in the sand. I mean, for sure. And I think that again, people will take things, and that's the kind of thing that you may never know what happened there. You know, there can be little groups that go off and do something, and these people who, and you know, like from all your work, it's like that.
Exactly, because what people call observable effects. When you're talking about mental changes, emotional changes, intellectual changes, spiritual changes, the quote-unquote observable effect, quantifiable effects, might not be anything that you or I ever know about or ever would be observed by the outer eye. How do you quantify that someone left there more mature? How do you quantify that someone left there more emotionally sober, intellectually deeper, not willing to look away? How do you quantify what it means that a woman would have left or a man would have left SisterGiant, and the next day when they pick up the newspaper, they're going to read articles on the front page that before that weekend they would not necessarily have read, about the economy, about politics, about war, about something going on, that before that weekend they thought, I'm not interested in that. But now they realize, no, a mature person must be interested in that.
The other thing I really feel can happen is women who have daughters.
Yes.
So the power of knowing, okay, hon, you know, I'm letting you know what's up, or inspiring them, feeling the responsibility of them knowing what's up. I mean, I'm sure you feel like that with your daughter, and I definitely do. I have 2 sons, but I definitely want them to know what's up, and I invite them to everything and have them come to all my events. And
my daughter, I have a 22-year-old daughter. She's a little bit more of a traditional thinker than I am. Things skip generations.
I guess so, but
yeah.
I can really imagine. Yeah, I know that can happen.
It's so odd for me.
It could be a little frustrating, but I am absolutely sure that there are women who left there knowing that they feel now a responsibility. It's like Marianne Williamson took the time to do that and create that whole thing. The least I can do is make sure my daughter knows what's up, at least something of what's up, and knowing the power of handing that down, if nothing else.
I see it a little bit. I see it vice versa too. Mm-hmm. I traveled this country, and I see how much people have to struggle and how hard people work to make ends meet, to raise their children's health, their children's education, put food on the table for their children, deal with all the myriad stresses of our society, particularly as they relate to our children growing up. And many of those people, by buying my books and coming to my talks, have given me the opportunity to have a life where I have a bit more ease than many of the people I meet, to be able to a little more easily spread my wings. Mm-hmm. I feel like the least I can do, the least I can do is to seek to give back what I have been given.
Well, you did, and you do. And as I always like to call you, she who gives to others. Your new Indian name, your new Native American name.
Thank you. And receives much in return.
Amen and namaste.
Amen and namaste. God bless you, Sunny. You're just great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So that is my interview with Marianne Williamson. And we are going out. This is KCLA, Sunny Chayes, Singing in the Rain. And And thank you, Marianne, for all that you do and all that you bring to all of us. Bye for
Children
now.
at your feet, wonder how you manage to make ends meet. Who finds the money when you pay the rent? Did you think that money was heaven sent? If Friday night arrives without a suitcase,